So once we have built our business model, once we have this current state of our business model, we're going to move into the next stage, and this is our formulation side. Now, it's important to understand that when it comes to strategic planning, a lot of businesses make the mistake of starting at this point. They go straight into the formulation, right? We don't want to do that. We want to make sure that we understand our current state, and that's what we do in the analysis phase. But now here in this formulation phase, we're going to ask ourselves, well, okay, what is it that we want to do? And it doesn't take starting straight into, jumping the gun and going into specific projects that we want to run. We still want to ideate here. One of the great things about this process is that we start with this ideation. We first try to create what we call this creative question. And you touched on it before. It's this, how might we achieve, right? And then the goal that you might have, considering those factors that you might find throughout your analysis. Throughout here, we're going to take a look at our SWOT analysis, get a comprehensive understanding of it and how that might feed into different projects. Another one of the things that we offer here are these elements known as the business model patterns, right? We want to make sure that we can innovate our business model, and we have a comprehensive library where we kind of demonstrate those different areas and how they play into those different areas of our business model and how we can innovate throughout those different patterns that we present to you guys in that library.
Exactly right on, Ray. So basically, because you're coming out of this analyze phase, you've been subject to this immersion process almost. You're coming out all wet with information. Everything is living in the back of your brain. You share that with the rest of the group, and you're ready to go into this creative effort wherever it's needed. Now, some of the strategies might require that you go into this creative thinking process, and some other ones perhaps fall under a different type of context. We have simple context, we have complicated context, complex context, chaotic context. So we need to make sure that we are adapting the type of leadership, the type of ideation to every type of context that we're finding. Now, quite often, as I was saying, a lot of these challenges where we formulate this creative question will require that we'll go into this creative thinking approach. So we also use a lot of the design thinking techniques and methodologies and approach. And as you're moving through this sensing, visioning, prototyping, and scaling approach for design thinking. And we do that by jumping, as you were saying, into the first stage where the first thing that we're looking for is to create a large number of ideas, which for us engineers, it sometimes even sounds a little bit counterintuitive, right? We're kind of trained to focus first on quality and then on quantity. Well, here we want to do it the other way around. We want to focus on quantity. We want to create a lot of ideas at this point. And one of the things that we do for that, Ray, is we work with different innovation patterns and different ways in which we can organize or which we can train ourselves, we can train our minds to be innovative, even if we don't think that this is part of our own personal toolbox.
Yeah, I mean, there's this reality when it comes to creativity and innovation, and that's that a lot of people have that innate ability, but that doesn't mean that we can't practice it. Think of it like a muscle. The more we practice it, the better we get at it. We provide kind of four ways in which we can what we call innovative strategies, right? We have 4 innovative strategies that can lead us down this path of innovative thinking, of creative thinking that is necessary when it comes to this ideation part. We provide 4 innovative strategies. The first is contrast. This is where we can take basic principles, basic rules, basic norms, and we kind of turn them upside down, right? And this is this novelty known as contrast. The next is combine or combination. This is where we take elements that don't seem to fit together really well, but once we kind of think about it, we can mix them, and then we kind of arrive to this destination of an innovative idea. And in our course, in our training, we not only provide practical examples on how to kind of guide brainstorming sessions, how to guide exercises to think in this way, but we also provide examples of organizations that are doing this really well.
That is correct. So we also have another set of tools that will fall under the category of restriction, which basically is how do we turn those restrictions, those limitations into opportunities? How do we embrace those limiting beliefs and reframe them in such a way that we are able to use them as starting points for idea generation? And we have one last set of tools that fall under the category that we know as context, which is basically taking things out of the regular context or taking other element that is actually in a foreign context and see if we can bring it or if it makes sense to use that as a starting point for us to create a new idea. So all these approaches to innovation that we covered during the training itself, they are all going to be very useful for us during the formulation process that we were talking about, Ray. In this first part of it, where we're doing the ideation process, we're filling in this parking lot of ideas, this jar of insights, and we're having many of these ideas. We will then need to start a funneling process before we can actually say that we could have a strategic plan. If we've put together a lot of ideas to solve for that creative question, now we need to go into this funneling process where we say, well, out of those ideas, we need to select the few ones that are going to make it. We're always going to be, or you're going to be hearing about this concept of just choosing a handful of them, literally a handful, between 3 and 5 for every one of the strategic objectives. And you want to be able to do the right impact versus effort or feasibility analysis for this. You want to make sure that the ones that you select have the right structure before you go into one further step of this filtering out or funneling out some ideas, and you validate that all of these ideas, they're actually supporting one another. Because as we move forward, we'll see that sometimes we'll just have ideas that seem to make a lot of sense in terms of one focus area, one business opportunity, one strategic objective, but that can also speak against some other strategic objective or some other focus area. So we want to make sure that everything is properly aligned before we say, hey, we now have a strategic plan that we can go out and implement.
So by the end of this phase, by the end of this formulation phase, we should have a comprehensive strategic plan. Now, it's off to the races. Now it's off to the execution portion of our model. And this is where we focus on 3 specific things. Number 1, we want to ask the question, how do we make it work, right? How do we do this? How do we actually, we've done the work. How do we actually now go on that walk? How do we actually go on that expedition up the mountain? And it first starts with launching and communicating the strategic plan, right? Secondly, we want to have the right strategic governance. We want the right systems and structures in place to support follow-up of our strategic plan, which oftentimes is one of the major pitfalls when it comes to strategies. And then lastly, we need to manage change. So in this module, we take a deep dive into what that looks like and what managing change is.
Absolutely. So when you start with concepts of launch and communicate, you need to make sure that you're crafting the right message, that you know what to say, that you're able to use tools such as storytelling to create this powerful, inspirational message that will stick with the people that perhaps were not part of your strategy formulation, but that you also want to bring on board your process. So we'll give you some tips and tricks around that, but it's very important that we focus on that, making sure that we bring that critical mass of people on board our strategy so that we can continue to have the impact that we're looking for. When we talk about strategic governance, Ray, we focus on the fact that it's important to know how often and what's the rhythm that we want to take in order for us to be able to track and follow up on our strategy. As we're saying, if we're hiking up the mountain, it's not like you take that first step out of your camp base and then you forget all about where you are at that point in time and you just continue walking. You constantly need to check your GPS, you constantly need to look back, you constantly need to look in front or up. And you need to know, this is where am I, these are the conditions, they are still as we planned, it is changing, now I'm having this new input. So you constantly need to do this tracking process. And we suggest that you do that through the proper strategic rhythm. That is basically the right set of meetings, and during each one of these meetings, that you're also able to put together the right information in the form of snapshots or dashboards that will provide you with the ability to do so. In this particular section, Ray, we also comment upon the importance of having the right tool that will help you spend most of your time actually analyzing data and not spend most of your time putting together data. So we do have a software system of choice. You're not required to use any specific system or software, not even ours. But we want to make sure that you know what the principles are in terms of making sure that everybody is on board, that you have this single source of truth that you're using, and that you're being able to spend your time in actually analyzing the information as is needed. Mm-hmm. And then the last module in the whole program is about change management.
Yeah, this is how we start to look at how we might, as an organization, tackle this problem of change, right? This obstacle that sometimes is communicated as change. And the reality is that we live in a new dynamic age where change is constant, change is always happening. And especially if your organization is not used to introducing new strategic plans and new initiatives, this module is going to be perfect for you because we're going to dive into this concept of, okay, I'm introducing something new. How might I do that carefully? And a lot of this last section has to do with the design of our strategy. And we've taken that into consideration, making sure that we're careful along the way with that strategic governance, making sure that we introduce those concepts way before, right? When it comes to our model, we're defining that frequency of that checkup. It's just that in this section, we dive deeper in it. And as well with change management, how do we start to manage this change? How do we make sure we can capture the minds and hearts of the majority of our organization so that they jump on board with this new plan?
Right. So in the words of Mr. John P. Carter, change has ceased to be episodic and is now continuous. So we want to have an organization that is ready for this continuous change. We suggest that you look into the concept of the accelerate principles and also into the dual system, which is something that we will cover, basically say there needs to be this structure within our organization where we are ready to handle the speed of this change. Almost one organization that follows this hierarchical structure that we're so used to see, almost this tree-like structure where you have your managers and your different levels of responsibility, which is really, really robust and really strong and really built for efficiency and continuous improvement. But then you also want to have this other underlying organization that's basically made up of some of the same members that are in your hierarchical structure, but that they form part of this army of volunteers that you're able to then bring into this more network-like structure where you are more built for speed, built for agility, almost resembling like small startup principles within the organization. And as you do that, you will be having the best of both worlds, best of the efficiency, but also the best of an organization that's ready to embrace change as part of its culture.
So as we begin to kind of close out this session, this kind of small introduction as to what our strategic management process looks like, there's a lot to unpack and there's a lot to dive into. So we invite you to take a look at our website, take a look at our content, and sign up for our training if you'd like. And we also have this little test that you can take to see where you are at in terms of your journey in strategic planning. We call it the strategic barometer, and it allows you to kind of see where you are at. It's important to understand that there are two extremes when that comes to mind when we talk about strategic management.
Exactly. So just like a barometer and you see those little bubbles floating there, we want you to be floating there in the middle. We don't want you to be at any one of those extremes. We want you to be in that just in between, just like Aristotle has said. And usually what happens, Ray, for many organizations that are just getting started in this journey is they fall more under the category of a beginner, right? So at this stage, and you probably can use this to place yourself as to where you're at this point in time, you have a vague idea of a vision of where you want to get. You know that strategic management is important. Not everybody within the organization is as familiar with some of the concepts as you are. You have objectives that you're working for in a more informal way, a little bit more of saying, yeah, I know that we need to work towards this, but you've never put together this formal structure of saying, this is how we're going to be measuring success. This is how we know that we're going to be making it. And we have this strategic and operational or operative management that are still kind of blended in terms of the activities and not clear as to how one contributes to the other. And what would typically happen for organizations that are in this beginner level is they'll start consuming some knowledge and they'll start taking a look at some information, and soon enough they'll read a book, they'll find some content and say, well, now we want to implement all of that. And they'll go from one extreme and they'll try to go straight into the other one, which is actually an attempt to start applying strategy with all of the concepts that you're hearing, with no specific time assigned for follow-up, with very little maturity in terms of your model. You're using different systems that are not the best ones for you to keep track of your information. There's a lack of alignment because basically we have too much indicator. We're trying to do this, but we're trying to do this with no specific order, with no specific guidance.
Yeah, what we want to find ourselves in is that sweet spot, that middle ground. We want to have everyone understand the strategy, understand the direction, achieve that strong sense of alignment where we have leaders that act out in a way that supports the strategy, where we have kind of a set of decisions to make. And when we do have to make those decisions, that they are clear because they are in line with the strategy, they're in line with the direction of the company. So this is kind of that middle ground that we want to get to. Go ahead and kind of ask yourself a series of questions and see kind of where you fall on that scale. And that's going to help you dictate what kind of help you need in terms of strategic planning moving forward.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Thank you for spending the time with us. We know that your time is very valuable. We hope that we have given some value to you as well with this introduction about what we do, what our model is, some ideas that perhaps you can already take and start thinking how they can take shape around your organization. We do invite you to visit our website, to follow our training modules. We have we have modules that are completely self-paced, on the go, that you can consume at your own rhythm. We also have hybrid programs where you have some pre-recorded content and additional articles, but then we also have these live sessions. And we are always excited to hear from you. So make sure to reach out, and thank you for joining us. Ray, thank you very much.
Thank you.